I think one of the superpowers of good business people is they have that skill already. They know how to recognize the value and then present it to someone who would buy it. If you have an innovation, it doesn't mean that it's valuable to other people, right? You have to find a way to then package and sell what that value is of what you created.
Hello there. Welcome. This is My Next Big Move with Jonathan Essery and Tom Warson. Hit it.
All right. What's up, Tom?
What's up, John?
How are
Where
you
you at today?
Home.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm home.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, trying to get myself oriented here. It's been a pretty busy week for me. How about yourself?
Yeah, not anything in particular busy, but just, little things that kind of stack on, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It all builds up.
Yeah, I was wondering, last week we talked a lot about where I was at and wanted to spend a little bit of time this week catching up with you, like we heard a little bit about your vacation, but wanted to hear how things are going on your current engagement and, kind of how that's been progressing and morphing and how time away has given you perspective on it, everything.
Oh yeah, that's a good topic. Yeah, I remember I liked the conversation we had last about your consideration for the next step for you, and as we're approaching like the IBM merger and placement in that, and I've been thinking along similar terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I like I'll start by saying we're talking about my considerations for my next move. Right now, I like the project I'm working on, but it's also something is just on my mind is, do I want to continue with multi-year projects, or do I like shorter, still a number of months where you get to build a team, get them flowing with some really great velocity and putting out some excellent work, and then delivers a product that a client carries forward, right? In this particular engagement I'm on, I'm supporting an enterprise project that has like a physical build to it. So it's very much a complex endeavor. And I like the puzzle making, if you will, between the different work streams.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And I think there's also some lessons for me at like my stage in learning some of the enterprise level consultancy skills and continuing to keep those sharp and sharpen them even further. So I've picked up a lot of lessons learned that way.
Yeah.
But now, like, I guess my consideration in kind of going into IBM has been, I think like a lot of other people, like, where will I fit? That's been a common question we've had in this merger process. And what will I be doing? Right. That's always kind of, I'll be doing the same thing, similar, we talked a little bit last time about aligning to different markets and sectors.
Yeah.
And, that I'm still in the middle of that process too. And I've sort of gone down into a few different journeys for me, if you will. So, I think, I think something that's been on my mind is I'm naturally curious and research things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I like this consultancy position and dealing with product, because it's always learning something new and it's always developing and creating something unique and interesting. Yeah. And so, IBM has a huge research, department in a series of different areas. So I've been trying to think through, like, at what level does digital product engineering kind of overlap with some of the research endeavors around quantum technology, or the application of quantum technology, or the development on top of quantum technology. And I'm saying quantum because it's like, that's the absolute edge of technological advancement that we have right now, right? Both in known physics and development of tools for ourselves with that quantum level of understanding.
Yeah.
You could replace that with AI. You could replace that with any of those other tools that, it would be at least the forefront of knowledge. And this was my revelation. I think I shared with you a few weeks ago on that's the thing I keep searching for. Like we talk about this hiking analogy when it comes to your hiking analogy that I love. It's like, you have to determine which peak you want to go towards and ascend, and then figure out the steps along the way of how to get there. Yeah. And I think the mountain peaks I'm drawn to are those that represent the edge of knowledge somewhere, and like venturing into the unknown intentionally. I think that's why I like science too, because there's always a hypothesis of, yes, but I think this other thing might happen. And then you test it and you try to disprove it in a lot of ways in the truest of senses for science. But when it comes to planning out your career, you're like, that's the area I want to go to I like creating and discovering new things. How can I make a living at that?
I do totally. Like I geek out about a ton of that stuff too. Do you just enjoy, not just, but is your draw towards the like discovering just what's new, or is your draw towards how do I apply what's new in a like potentially disruptive but innovative sort of way? Because I know a big thing for me is I'm frustrated that I'm going to die someday.
Yes.
Mostly because like I think about all the stuff that we've learned even just in the past 20 years, much less 2000, right? And the way that like we know how people thought about the world back then and what we found and what we know about the world now and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, future generations are going to get to learn so much cool stuff and I'm not going to get to be there.
Yeah. Jealous. Very jealous. So exactly.
I'm much more drawn to the former side of that question, which is like just what is out there. I like applying things in new ways, but I'm not as drawn towards, say, like, is there a new nuclear power plant that exists and technology around that? That's fascinating. I want to read about that. Do I want to go figure out how to integrate said technology into what I do today? Not as drawn to that sort of implementation of things.
Right.
I could go caveats on all that stuff. So, so sort of question back to you as you look at this mountain range of, the edge of knowledge sort of thing. Is your goal in getting towards those things to be able to integrate them and disrupt what currently exists today? Or is it more of a like, it's another piece to your fusionist sort of thing of saying, well, the application comes when I have all the information?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I think I'd like to coin the, the mountain range of opportunities, right? I like that. I like that. We might continue that.
Yes. You get credit for that.
Selecting the peak you want to go towards next.
Yeah.
That's a really, I think you touched on the very sort of area I've been trying to suss out and clarify for myself, because is it like the new knowledge itself and discovering a new way of thinking or a new species in the world or a new engineering creative feat, or is it applying what someone else has discovered in a new and creative way?
Yeah.
And maybe you discover something new along that way. Yeah. And in contemplating all of that, I end up contemplating where I've naturally been drawn to or been in positions to add value that other people have recognized or that I have just wanted to do naturally, all the way back to my childhood to think about and answer that question. Because in this contemplation, I keep anchoring or coming back to this analogy of being the shortstop. So in baseball, you have home base and then 3 bases, right? But you have 4 infielders to help cover wherever that ball might go from the batter. I played shortstop when I played t-ball as a kid. And I never really thought about that. I was like, okay, I play shortstop. That's my position. But the reason I played shortstop, well, let's just take that fact. A second piece of evidence and fact is that when I played football in middle school, I was the slot position, a position I had never heard of watching football most of my childhood. You know, it wasn't the quarterback, it wasn't the running back, it wasn't receivers, it wasn't a lineman. It was sort of that flex role that could be leveraged in any one of those other positions, whatever made the play strategically the best for the use, right?
Yeah.
And never really thought about that either. And then I got into kicking and I got into soccer. And soccer's very much, there's not really, I guess you have midfielders that could be flexible, but I was a defenseman, you know, so it sort of changed the approach. It doesn't really work with my analogy,
but depends on how strong your kicking leg is, John.
Yeah, and I also didn't like to run, so I sort of like, I was like, I'm not a very good runner.
Offense from the defensive side of the field if you kick it hard enough, but
yeah, exactly. So I focused on that part. But I keep coming, they always do some kind of awards in high school, just to, you know, at the end of every season. And I think I got like the Hustle Award, and I was very proud of that. Yeah. I was like, oh, like I wasn't spectacular. I wasn't the most talented. I wasn't like the star player. And we weren't a very good team either. And so I didn't really think about it. I was like, okay, cool. Awards, like, we'll just see what happens. We get a free meal. Never been a part of this. I didn't expect anything. And then I ended up, getting this Hustle Award. And I was like, oh, that's nice. Like, because that's all I've really been doing is putting my all into everything. And so I think about those moments because when it came to my sort of like natural capabilities of being flexible and being able to do a variety of things, that value was in shifting the play of whatever the coach might want to do, or backing up second baseman or the third baseman, or filling the area in baseball to retrieve the ball. And so I was like, okay, so I've always sort of been this flexible person, or a versatile person, maybe to evolve my language a bit. And so when I think about that, I think the application of new knowledge seems to be now where I'm drawn to professionally. Okay. And taking insights from a variety of things. And it's like, okay, I'm not wanting to pursue and do the grinding hard work of testing and reporting and logging and all of, like, let's just think about it for a scientist, what they might want to do to discover something new or to prove out a theory, or to test somebody else's theory, right, and back it up.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, like, you guys figure it out, basically. I want to know what it is, because I tend to imagine a world where that is applied in a certain way. And so in that sort of like visionary skill, let's say, that's where I've been sort of tinkering with what value can I provide. And that's sort of where I come to this fusionist brand and persona as well. And that, okay, I can pick up a lot of different things, but my value is in pulling from one thing and applying it to another. So like just the other day, I was talking on my particular engagement, because we're dealing with multiple disciplines and multiple projects that intersect to develop the big project that we're working on. Our role, in program management in this particular case, is to help facilitate like the schedule and sequencing and interdependencies of events, to sum it up. And so we're almost a couple years in to this project. And so there's been a lot, and it's kind of time to reassess like where those interdependencies are. And like, I was talking about this with the program manager, and it came to me, it's like, oh, this is just, we want to do something very similar to clash detection and modeling. So when you, they'll be more familiar with those that are familiar with BIM,
building information modeling.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of a design build type philosophy that allows you to do your constructability and all that kind of stuff at the same time as you're doing your designs. So how I've seen BIM applied really well, or is when the engineering designers are working hand in hand with the construction guys or the maintenance and operations guys, and saying like, well, we need to send this duct from here to here, and the calculations tell us it has to be this amount of distance. And the guys who are out there are saying like, well, if you want to build that, you're going to have to build this other thing first, or you can't build this other thing because we won't be able to squeeze that in there. And then the operations guys are sitting there saying like, yeah, and you can't fit a guy through that hole over there that you just designed. So, but you're able to see that in real time. And you're able to see like, oh, well, if we send this duct that way, it's going to intersect with the other maintenance, the electrical line that we just sent the other direction.
Or some plumbing line or the structure. Yeah.
You're able to see that in the BIM model rather than when you're actually on site and you've got, a crew of 50 people who are pouring concrete and pulling electrical lines and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden some guy's saying, well, I can't run my conduit because somebody else put a duct there. And now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of idle workers and you're losing efficiency, you're losing cost, et cetera.
Yeah. And then you end up with something janky at the end because they, it's not going to work the way it was designed. So they have to pivot to something else. You can't have all of it. So it allows you to definitely have as many of those variables considered in advance so you can design them most effectively. Right. And so the clash detection is a big part of that. Like you have these moments throughout the design and development process where you identify where things might intersect. And so to try to take this example home in managing a schedule, right, which it's complicated on its own for a big project. But when it comes to managing interdependencies, it's like I kind of drew on that as like the same thing. Like it's a way to share with others hey, let's figure out where our efforts might actually clash into each other to avoid those risks, or understand where they intersect to then communicate the interdependencies a little bit more effectively. And so, having that knowledge from BIM modeling, it kind of helped then clarify a way to approach this program management. So it wasn't, effort that we were doing. And I was like, oh, okay. And which the other program manager hadn't really heard before. And I was like, oh, it helped kind of clarify that process and method as well.
Yeah.
So
that's really,
because sometimes, and I like that stuff because like in product management, we have a lot of methods, and then a lot of people have like templates for those methods. But when it comes to communicating what you do to somebody else, I find it's kind of difficult to describe those, even if you say, oh yeah, we take an agile approach. Well, because it's so confusing, then now agile as an approach gets disseminated across very many different ways of doing things and just gets called agile. It's the easiest thing to pick on, I think. But so it's an interest that particular communication is an interesting conundrum to me, just because it's like, how do we not have like definitives?
Yeah.
How do we not agree? And maybe it's just because it's so young relatively to some other industries, right? Like roles like product owner and digital product management, things like that. 20 years really isn't that long.
Totally.
Role,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Compared to the traditional project management industry that has existed, since Roman times. Or arguably
where it evolved from construction and building and design and
architecture. Like we've been learning things about those sorts of like design, build, test, sort of stuff for generations. Whereas Agile and software development it's a completely different paradigm. And we keep finding ways of backing ourselves into project with product. But there is that sort of,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say too, this is interesting to me. I'm distilling what you're saying into the three major peaks in the mountain range of opportunity for you. Your edge of knowledge is research, discovering something new, developing and creating something that's unique. Engineering, which is applying something in a new way, developing and creating something better. And I'll say operation, which is really like understanding how things are being used. Maybe some of the collision detection that you're talking about fall into that last category. But I think all three of those things are important. And I'll give an analogy that I have. When I was a senior in undergrad, my capstone engineering project was we were building a car for the Shell Eco Marathon Challenge.
Oh, nice.
Cool, kind of interesting thing. The whole point was to design a vehicle that got the best gas mileage possible. We did this. We designed basically a tricycle kind of looking car. It had a single drive wheel on the back, 2 steering wheels in the front, custom built aluminum frame body, fiberglass, lightweight, all that kind of stuff, right? Teardrop shape to try to be super like aerodynamic.
Yeah.
I was on a sub team around the drivetrain and transmission. Now we had basically said we're going to take the previous year's group had basically taken the motor off of a like a scooter, an electric scooter or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And it had a CVT transmission. CVTs being very lossy. They're efficient from a like you're always getting the right gear ratio that you need, but they also use a band or whatever that slips a lot as you're whatever.
Oh, the belt.
So the belt. Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So we said, okay, cool. This year's innovation for us will be to we'll get rid of the CVT and move towards a chain drive. And then because it'll be direct drive then, and I'll also add that the way that we were going to run this car was essentially hypermiling. So we would accelerate up to a certain speed, turn the engine off entirely, and then rely on the aerodynamics and the momentum to continue to navigate the course and everything like that until we reached a certain point in which we'd turn the engine back on, power up, and then coast again.
What did you call that?
Hypermiling.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, if you don't need to run the engine, then you don't need to idle the engine, which is very inefficient and burns a lot of gas for not a lot of energy.
And we see that we've seen that in the last decade or so with production vehicles as well. They'll try to maintain fuel costs by turning the engine off
certain cylinders.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
So our team basically decided, okay, we're going to move towards this chain. We don't really need we don't need a gear set, right? We don't need to have a low gear and a high gear and stuff like that because we're just going to accelerate to a certain point, turn it off, and then accelerate again. The point that I'm getting to is we opted to install a centrifugal clutch, which, it's just a housing, and then there's another rotating disc in the middle. And when you reach a certain RPM on the clutch, it expands out, right? And it grips that outer housing. And so now you are in gear.
Yeah. You're
still
engaged.
A little bit lossy because there's still going to be some slip between the inner and the outer disc. But way less lossy because as soon as it catches, it's fully engaged, and then our chain is fully engaged, and then we're able to accelerate we're able to use the full power of the engine rather than something being lost to slip and what.
Right. With the full, you're minimizing your slip loss rate. That would be the full time you're trying to engage.
Yeah.
Minimizing that to just the front end for a very short amount of time to then engage for longer periods of time and therefore gain efficiency through that.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
I'm spending way too much time explaining this, but
it's fascinating. But yeah, so yeah,
So we opted for this centrifugal clutch, myself and my two other peers on the drivetrain team. And so one of the guys, he says, cool, let's go buy this particular clutch. And my other teammate, she said, well, I don't understand. We're engineers. We should be building our own. And the other guy and I kind of like looked at each other and talked about it and everything. And then we were like, if we wanted to design our own, we would have to go learn metallurgy, calculate all the physics, then start running a bunch of tests. This is all information that we already have from someone who's already done this work. So we have 6 months to build this vehicle. What you're talking about of, this whole thing is many years worth of product development and research, essentially. And to me, that was when I realized that engineering was less about finding something new and instead applying the new things that somebody else has kind of like done the work to discover and saying, how can we apply this in a way that takes advantage of engineering is much more incremental than these, we hear about these big feats of like new technology, new bridges, new airplanes, stuff like that. But all of it is a very incremental implementation of, we did it this way last time. Here's the next thing that we can integrate from the research that we've learned before. Anyway, I say all this in summary to say there's the research piece, which is doing the hard work to discover something new and handing it off to somebody else. There's the value that they are creating is intangible. It's knowledge. There's the engineering side of things where you're taking that intangible knowledge and you're turning it into something tangible, meaning a product.
Yep.
And then there's the operation side of things where you're doing both tangible and intangible because you're utilizing the relationships and the process. Like there's a tangible process that you're creating because you're understanding how things are going to interact. How are we going to use this tangible product that you're creating in order to generate value, right? You can create an engine. How are you going to drive the engine? So when I think about it across those things and I distill it down to those three things, you've got the research, the engineering, the operation. Coming back to you and your question, what are you most drawn, like what value are you most drawn to creating? Is it the intangible knowledge that you can give to somebody else? Is it the tangible product that you can create to be used? Or is it the tangible and intangible way it's going to be used?
That's, you could say process. Yeah. The process of
the
using that thing. That's interesting. In laying those three things out, I also think about the business model that drives each of them. As you were giving your engineering analogy or your story and then applying it to this, I was thinking about, it's kind of like the difference between, let's say, a car manufacturer that to develop cars and produce a product and sell them at a certain price and make a living, let's say, versus NASA that is discovering new things and is about exploring the frontier of space, which includes Earth to a large degree of what they research and try to discover, right? We always think about it's out there, but it's also like we're a part of that. Compared to Elon Musk and SpaceX, it's like, I want to build my own rocket because I think I can do that better than the other guys. But I have a business model to fund what we're going to do with a rocket booster that returns back to Earth that we can use multiple times. And in that way, it becomes a commercial opportunity that the whole SpaceX team kind of gets behind and can then again, leverage the knowledge that they're able to also like one research, but then apply at the same time, which is a much bigger effort. So it's interesting because those are all enticing, but with different layers of flash, let's say.
Of course.
Right? And if you lay it out as simply and going back to what you said, like research, discovering of new knowledge versus engineering and applying it in a creative way versus the operations and a process of efficiently leveraging what has been created. I think I feel like business people are more oriented towards the operations. I love putting a business together or creating a business around a technology. And I like that, but I'm not drawn to that. I like the new knowledge and research on discovering new things, but I more so like the way that operates and the excitement of discovering something new, but more so on how to apply it.
Yeah.
So like I think back. So I think I'm still very much more in the engineering a product, where it feeds into a business model, but it can take some of the creative discoveries and advancing that product forward. And I think about a design technique called parametric modeling. And if you're familiar with it, it basically is a way to control the data flow of manipulating inputs, parameters that get configured in a certain way. And in my example, controls geometry as the output, right? So you can now adjust parameters that then in real time changes or morphs the way geometry might be modeled. And then of course, like you can take that further and engineer it of like how you make that digital thing into a physical thing. And that's like, I have a real passion for that, right?
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah. You're designing a table, and at some distance or width of the table, you have to add another leg in order to make it stable.
Right.
And when you plug in your parameter, the geometry, your model automatically updates, and your design then spits out based on the rules that you've established. That if you want to build a 10-foot table versus a 20-foot table, you're going to have to change or update your design in this.
Yeah. So you can control how you construct that in a little bit more algorithmic way. So you're actually designing the algorithm rather than designing the table. And I think about that because that's exactly what AI is doing, or generative AI is doing today to a lot of people's sort of like normal everyday stuff, particularly in imagery and content creation. You know, and at the beginning of like when Midjourney came out, and I was watching my LinkedIn feed basically, and Christo had posted something and posed the question about whether or not generative AI images, if they were like a viable marketing content creation tool. But it was something like that. And I was like, yeah, why not? Like, you're the one designing the algorithm that outputs the thing.
Yeah.
And his point was like, it's never perfect. You still have to take it and do the final piece, which is what we're realizing how to best leverage that tool, which is true. Like, it doesn't generate the exact thing you want. It generates something in big air quotes. It imagines that might fit the prompt you give it, and which is powerful because it reminds me of my parametric days, because you would develop the algorithm and now you can have mass customization of ideas and print out 1,000 of them in the same time that it might make that you might be able to model one. And now you get to pick the approach that was better for you. Does that mean you're no longer designing? No, I think the design now evolves to now consider other things in that process rather than just how do I make the one thing I have in my mind. Now it's it can consider how to make those for me. Now I get to select the one that matches best to my vision of what that is and then carry that over the finish line, you know? So I think that's just a common sort of evolution of how AI is certainly evolving the way that we think. And
it's changing how we think about like what a product is, you know, to use your parametric modeling example. You start with building a table. And so your product is the table. You take the information that you have about the design of that table and you start to create the algorithm, the dependencies, the engineering engineering calculations. I mean, and then you're able to plug it into a model that says like, okay, well, what if I want to build a different size table? Your product is now the system, the algorithm, your design is not just the table, it's the system of tables that you can make. And so you've I don't know, like, this is an open question. Like, does that mean you've added a product because you still can produce tables? And now you also have a system to produce tables, like, which is a product in and of itself.
Right. That's right.
So yeah, is it the gestalt, like the sum of its parts is greater than the whole sort of thing? Is that a new product?
Greater than some of its parts.
Yeah. Is that a new product itself? Like, is the product now the system and has that overtaken the tables that you're producing?
Right. Whereas like the output was the product so clearly defined by the term of art, let's say.
Yeah.
And now there's sort of a secondary value in how you created that art, which is also replicable.
Yeah.
And I think in that open question, my approach to that is, well, which one is more valuable to whoever's buying it, let's say. And I've seen in that particular parametric, let's stick with that sort of market, the end result has a certain consumer market, small, relatively, more European for sure at the architectural scale. But then the process also has a market of people interested in thinking that way, designing that way, but it's also very small and unique. Yeah. And there are only a handful of people I've seen actually be able to take the value of developing the various processes and methods of leveraging that tool that other people want to replicate. So it's kind of interesting to your point because it is an innovation, but I have always confused as to why it never really took off or went mainstream here. I have my theories and opinions, and maybe we could talk about those one day. But it's definitely an interesting thing I've been considering as well, because if you have an innovation, it doesn't mean that it's valuable to other people, right? You have to find a way to then package and sell what that value is of what you created. And that's the part I'm learning now, like more so. Like I started realizing that a few years ago, but not really. Like I think one of the superpowers of good business people is they have that skill already. They know how to recognize the value and then present it to someone who would buy it. They just, I can think about real estate agents. We've been watching, not to plug any particular show, but my wife and I are into Selling Manhattan right now on Netflix and love it. First of all, we love New York. Like we would live there if we could. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful, weird, cranky city.
Yeah.
That is just, there's an energy about it. Anyway, we love the architecture. They show off these like multi-million-dollar places and buildings, and she likes the drama and I like the design. Like, I mean, she likes the design too, but like, we're drawn to two different aspects of that. But I think about the way that real estate works, and good real estate agents understand the value of how to sell a vision that someone else wants to experience. You can sort of see it in that show. Yeah. The top performers, as they describe themselves, selling real estate at larger amounts of money, top performers, because that's a harder sell. There are fewer market, and there are fewer people who know how to convey the value to that particular market. And if you don't know how to do that, you don't sell the top performing or the most expensive real estate. You start somewhere lower, and you have to figure that out along the way. And everybody has their own flavor and their own style, but it's still very much that, like, systemically, you're just need to know how to package it to the right person to consume it in a way that they believe it. And that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Being able to identify that is one thing. I can identify it, but I'm not the best. I don't have that sort of charismatic talent to package something well and just convey the emotion, despite being a very emotional guy. It doesn't always come out in that way, so that's a part of what I'm working on too, and discovering that's a key piece. Well,
it's interesting too. I'm rewatching Silicon Valley right now.
Oh, nice.
TV show.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got this genius, great, you know, visionary coder guy who's developing a new technology, a new compression algorithm.
Yeah.
And he struggles to like have the public speaking, you know, and he's anxious and whatever. And then you've got this very brash guy, you know, who knows how to just walk into a room, and he knows how to get people pulled in, engaged, and say yes to the thing, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's like fake, right? Like even if it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, he still also believes in the value of the product that he's trying to get you excited about. And so those aren't two different skills. But I'm in season 5 now, and you know, that character is no longer there. And so now you just have this founder who's really good, and he's suddenly in charge of all of these people and being asked to lead them. And he's like, I don't know how to like fire people up. And the episode sort of ends with, he just got to work. He just started coding and everything like that. So his way of inspiring and selling and making things valuable people was showing like, I'm going to show up and do the work. And like, I'm going to prove to you why this is an exciting thing. It's exciting because how hard I'm willing to work at it. And I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. In some ways, it was really convicting of just being like, you know, it had a little bit of that, like, well, if no one's going to do it, then I'm just going to have to do it myself sort of thing, which I like and don't like. But it was just really like, yeah, like I said, it's convicting because it basically says like, well, if I'm having trouble like trying to sell people on the value of something, then I just need to show them the value myself. I just need to do it. Like if I'm not going to be a salesman, which I don't really want to be, I don't want to be that smoke and mirrors sort of thing. I'm just going to be honest with you. And if there's value in something, then I'm just going to create the value. I don't know. Maybe that works. Maybe that doesn't. I don't, to use a real estate example, I don't know how you create the value of real estate without selling it. There's nothing like you as a real estate agent or whatever can do to like do the work to prove the value of someplace. So I don't know. I go back and forth on that kind of stuff, but
I think there's an interesting nugget to pull out of that too. In technology, we talk a lot about, as far as career paths, there's technical path or a strategic path. And I think that's very true in most industries as well. But I think you can also think about that less so in career path development, but also in identifying your core strengths and how to demonstrate value to your peers and to a client or on a project or to your boss. And you don't have to be the showy person if that's not your natural strength. What you do have to do, if you're more technically oriented, you still have to figure out how to demonstrate the authentic power of what you can do. And that still needs to be communicated. And I think that's a part that everyone should have some level of storytelling, and how to put together a cohesive narrative of the value of what you do. And I think sometimes that gets missed just because it's not talked about a lot. But in the world of business, it is an exchange of value. We work at a place because paying you as an employee is valuable to me as a business because I can leverage what you bring to the table and make more money so that I can pay more people and exchange more value, right? Yeah. That's basic concept of any business. And so I think the sooner you get to understand that element and then your specific company's flavor of that or model of that, you can then start to connect the dots between what you do very, very well and what the company is looking to do very, very well, and then how you are impacting the company's ability to do what it wants to do very well. And therefore you tie together, here's how I'm valuable, here's how I'm important to what the purpose of this company is for. Doing that is harder than it sounds, but it doesn't have to be the thing that somebody else is really good at. It can be your own authentic core strengths. There's just some soul searching, some retrospective contemplation to do there, but also I think it helps to know that it's still very valuable, but you have to know how to tell the story of what that impact and what the value is.
I like that. I like the idea of the business has a value narrative to describe what it's delivering and what its needs are to deliver that value. And individuals have their own value narrative of their needs and what they can provide or deliver as far as value. The whole idea of building a business is connecting value. It's connecting the value of the individuals and the value of everything to deliver value elsewhere. The hang up that I have is that we want to operationalize all of that. Like, we want to turn those value narratives into OKRs and line item, sort of things, and say like, oh, well, you match 80% of our value narrative, and so like you meet the threshold, or whatever. And I understand, like, I get why, like, you have to have some sort of like, do you match or not? I just struggle with like, how we turn those value narratives into a checklist sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth on like just the idea of how do you quantify intangible value, right? How do you measure it? And is it worth measuring?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, is it worth trying to create a measure of intangible value, or does the intangible value express itself somewhere else that's tangible? So like, rather than trying to create, I don't know. Yeah. I'd be curious. What do you think?
Yeah. It reminds me, of Schrodinger's cat, because it's sort of like this, the act of measuring it changes the thing itself. Almost like the act of recording a podcast, in essence, changes the conversation you would have into a podcast. And I think the measurement of something will have an effect of the thing. And I've not yet seen where the measurement of something naturally fits into how that thing operates. You almost always have to adapt. And it could just be, maybe there is a system out there, and I would love to know if anyone has something in mind that better adapts to the humanity of operating and practicing a business in a way that doesn't disrupt the act of doing it as much, or force there's a word I'm looking for, force the adoption to a new paradigm that I have to now think through, or I have to remember now to go check this box, which I like checking boxes, so maybe that's not so bad. But
like maybe this is the piece that I have or that I'm hung up on is, our current capital system is based on consistency, efficiency. Our stock prices are rewarded for consistent, predictable cash flows. And it's in our human nature. We want to know that things are going to be okay tomorrow, today. But at the same time, we know that that's not possible. The world is chaos, and not like in a, it's on fire sort of chaos. I mean, it is, but but like, the world is, it's unpredictable. There are so many variables. Even just your mood when you wake up day to day, you could do the same thing every day, and something's going to change how you feel. Something's going to make you sleep a little bit less or a little bit more, and you're going to wake up feeling bright and happy, or you're going to wake up feeling like subdued and just like melancholic. Maybe because of the weather. Who knows? Point is that like, maybe that's the problem that I have with coming up with a operationalized checklist sort of thing that you apply to value, is that it's not adaptable, it's not agile enough to the constantly changing dynamics of the world. And we are rewarded for locking ourselves into that sort of thing. And I will say this, like, the caveat to I think coming back to like the sort of the mountain peaks, you know, do you want to go research, engineering, operation? I think there's a false exclusivity there of, well, you know, you go towards one and, you know, you can't really, like, you can only go towards one at a time, but you need all three.
You abandon
There's nothing to say that, like, you're sitting there in engineering and you're just like, gosh, we know that we need to apply this new thing in order to, like, do something better. But the only way we're going to get there is by going and doing research. We have to go research. So, you know, like, being locked into something like that, saying, you know, well, the value is only let's just define that. And maybe all of this is under the auspice of, quick story, I'll try to make it quick. I'm dealing with a couple of things at our company now around policies and procedures, specifically around, like, people starting work or doing work without following a signature or getting the right approval in a very specific Slack channel. All of this as a way of saying, in order to meet audit, when we have third-party auditors come in and they say, are we following our process? Are we approved or not? And it just feels like the amount of work that we're doing to follow our work process is a lot. You know, we've set these, like, it has to go check this. It just feels like more work to try to say, like, well, what's the real value that we're trying to do here? Are we giving ourselves the opportunity to adapt to how we deliver value or how we connect one value to another value? And you know, I think our modern corporate culture, and maybe every society throughout time and history has struggled with this too, of the basic conundrum of, we like predictability, but the world is anything but predictable.
And we try to predict the best we can, and sometimes that mismatches with expectations of, and I think
absolutes. That's sort of the beauty of this podcast, I think. Deals in the conversations that we're having is the reason why we talk about, like, a hiking analogy sort of thing, or that I do, is because it's like, well, you can only go one place at a time, but you can go to multiple places, and you have to. Like, you know, if it starts raining, well, you can't stay out in the open. You got to, like, make a move. And so, the idea of idea of, like, my next big move, or my next big thing is because there's always going to be a next thing. So it's less about, like, where are we going? It's less about the what, it's more about the how.
And maybe even more about the why, depending on where someone's at, right? If you don't have that foundational drive, which my wife and I talk about a lot because we have very different drives, then you're not going to get off the couch and go do something. If Socrates is really right, like, we always choose pleasure, which is often not more work for most people. And so, I think that's a really good point maybe to end on, is, and maybe we can continue on our next show about, you can only go one place at a time, but I was thinking, to extend your hiking analogy, you have to be prepared with all the right gear. And sometimes maybe you're lugging around the wrong tools to get to where you want. And maybe you have to let go of things to pick up new things that are lighter and better and actually more, that perform more effectively on the new journey you need to go to. Because what is it? I don't know if it's an old adage, but, like, what got you here isn't necessarily going to get you to the next place. So you have to always be evolving and changing the way you approach things.
I struggle a lot with
exactly what we're talking about.
Just in case. I try to be so prepared that I plan for every just in case. And the idea of, well, I got rid of my pocket knife, and now what I need is a pocket knife, so I have to go get a pocket knife. Like the idea of just like, I have to do that. Or when traveling, it's like, well, I just be prepared for everything. And it's like, dude, there's gonna be a Target at the place you're going to. If you need to get a towel, you can go get a towel. Like, So there's, I think,
if it really comes up,
part of that analogy is that, like, it's less about being prepared for anything just in case, and more about the, like, are you prepared in a way that A, you can use what you have, and B, do you know how to get what you need when the time comes for you to need that thing? You know, I'm going through a process of like getting rid of a ton of old files, and I find myself saying like, oh, but what if I, want to reference that old dude, you're gonna just Google it again anyway. You're not gonna go search the old files, delete it, be done with it. Like,
yeah, which is an interesting evolution of our humanity, because now I don't have to have my own repository. It's already out there, and I just have to know how to find it. Yeah.
John, pleasure as always.
All right, my friends. This has been great. See you, man.
See you soon, John.
Thank you for listening to My Next Big Move. I'm Jonathan Essery with Tom Morrison. We'll see you next time.